Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll get started here in just a minute. My name's Eric Gregg, and I am the founder and CX strategist here at Clearly Rated, and I'm joined by Darian Day, our Director of Analytics and Research. I'll just go through a little bit of housekeeping while everybody's still getting into their seats for today's webinar. But this is being recorded. So you'll have access to this. And this information is kind of a executive level readout of a report that we released that is available. And you can actually use the QR code on this next slide to be able to download that link and download that full report. And that's at no cost there. So Darren, if you want to take us forward to that next slide so that they can see that QR code. This is a really important piece of research that we do each year around what buyers of accounting services are really trying to understand and what they want from their accounting firms. So we're really excited to have been doing this. I think Darian and I together have done, this is probably the 10th one that we've done. It's probably been a full decade of this report that we have brought to the industry as well. I do want to just say a quick thank you to our sponsor for this research, the Association for Accounting Marketing, and they just continue to be amazing partners to us in many different ways. And so thank you to them for continuing to help us bring this to the industry. The big thing that you're going to see today, and again, we'll take questions as we're going through, so you can put information and questions. I'll be monitoring the chat, but also in the Q&A tab, we're happy to take questions as we go through here. This is meant to be, again, kind of a high-level executive readout. We'll talk some about the actual research itself. Darian's going to be kind of the expert on the research itself, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of color commentary here and there based on the consulting that I do and the experience that I have as well. But what we really see on this, in this year's study is not dissatisfaction, actually increasing levels of satisfaction that Darian will go through. But just rapidly evolving client expectations. And this is probably not going to be a big surprise, right? We'll have data that kind of underpins what I think all of us are feeling, which is that, it's like the water slide just got to the really steep part, and we're going real fast now and trying to keep up with this as our clients are trying to keep up with this and really trying to stay out ahead of it in many ways there as well. So, Darian, you've led this research for a number of years here, and you know it better than really anyone at Clearly Rated. So, why don't you walk us through the most boring and maybe most important slide of the whole thing, which is talking a little bit about that methodology and why we feel really confident that this is a good view into the industry and what buyers are really feeling.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric, and thanks everybody for joining us on the call here. We've got some great information, great data, stories to share with you all, and excited to get started. So, as Eric mentioned, boring but important methodology. So, as we also mentioned, we've been doing this for over a decade. We do this for multiple industries. We've been researching the accounting industry specifically for over a decade as well. The main purpose is establishing our satisfaction benchmarks, but beyond that, we like to identify emerging trends, study topics of interest that we're all, as Eric mentioned, that we're all feeling and seeing day to day. And then for the accounting industry in particular, we explored topics this year such as current services, ideal services, experiences. Also preferences and expectations on AI, probably not surprising that we're going to dive into that. Advisory services, fees and billing structures, industry talent shortages, and those impacts in other areas. So this was fielded earlier this year. We got responses from 180 buyers of accounting services, and those were balanced to reflect organizational size and industry as well as decision-making influence of the respondents. So Some additional information on who our respondents are. We had a median age of 40 years old this year. We have a good cross-section of industries represented. You can see that list there. The respondent organization size also had a good mix this year, and this was where some of this balancing came in. So we could get a really nice cross-section of how these experiences might be the same and how they might differ at various organizational sizes. So you can see those breakouts there, and then the accounting services used. You can also see that we topped out with tax services, payroll, audit, and insurance services. We asked a big battery, but these were the top 5 that came through. So quickly, today's agenda, we're going to go through AI usage, trust, and oversight, what the buyers are experiencing and fears as well as opportunities there. We've got the advisory gap. So that's the gap between advisory services and we've got talent and switching risk. So that's our third section. So that's going to go into general talent shortage questions in the accounting industry and kind of the risks there. We've got the fixed fee shift that we'll go into, and then we've got regulatory and satisfaction. That section 5 is just kind of a lightning round. We've got just kind of one quick data story on each one of those things, and then we've got our final parting thoughts here.
So I'm excited, honestly, on a couple of those things, Darian. The biggest piece that I'm actually most excited about that I found most compelling was actually not the AI piece, although I'm excited to jump in here, and I know a lot of people want to go through that piece of it. But the talent shortage aspect of that and the impact that that has on clients, I think is something that gets estimated a lot, and so I was really excited to see some of the data around that, and I think it opens the door for some really compelling conversations about how firms really manage and have a process in place for when there's turnover, when there are new contacts coming into accounts on either side. So excited to get this going, but let's start where I think a lot of people are really focused, which is what clients and buyers actually think around our utilization of these AI tools and what they expect from their experiences coming out of that. So why don't you jump into this section?
Absolutely. I want to preface this, as Eric mentioned, this is just kind of an executive level readout of a lot of data that we have on all of these topics. So just be aware that full length accounting industry report has so many good pieces of information. So I feel like I can't include everything that I want to, but I just wanted to preface that. When we're talking about AI, we've got kind of this core tension. So on one hand, we see here we've got a lot of opportunity and a lot of positives that accounting buyers are noticing. So we've got strong percentages, strong majority saying AI has improved accuracy and quality of work they received from their accounting firm. We've got 81% that agree that automation has made their accounting firm faster without sacrificing that quality. Additionally, we also asked, have you inquired to your accounting firm about what AI tools they're using, and we found that over 3 out of 4, so 77%, actually have proactively asked their firm how they're using AI in their services that they're providing. So there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of pros that our clients and our buyers are seeing with these tools. Now, along with that, we've got some pretty explicit and intense expectations about that. So we've got 86% agree that they would, hold their accounting firm fully responsible for any errors that are related to AI in any sort of the service relationship. We've also got 83% that are agreeing that they prefer human judgment over AI generated outputs for any type of deliverable. So again, and then on the bottom right here, we also see that 79% are concerned about how they're concerned about potential errors in that AI generated accounting work. So how we frame this is we've got an opportunity, but we've got an expectation. So there's guardrails that we need to put in place. There's guardrails, when it comes to the service relationship and those expectations that need to be understood. And obviously there's process guardrails and process limitations to the internal ways that we can use that to deliver on these expectations and deliver on these pros that the clients are seeing. But this is one of the core things that we found this year is that there's opportunity, but there's also expectations that come with it. Additionally, we've also found, you might have noticed the subheader on this section, buyers have basically moved past the idea of, past debating whether firms should be using AI. It's more about they're setting the terms of accountability, they're setting terms of oversight and all of those further measures. So AI is such a ubiquitous thing these days that the expectation basically is that it's already essentially happening. Additionally, we wanted to look at how AI might be viewed as a competitive differentiator or potentially not viewed as a differentiator. So we've got some split decisions on here. 40% are actually more likely to engage or stay with a firm that is using AI and that they know about that. Only 17% say that they would be outright less likely to do so. So that's over 2 times the amount that are more likely than less likely. So there's some clear directional change that we're seeing there. We also have a large, portion in the middle, which kind of matches what we generally see in the realm of AI, where there's just some uncertainty and it depends and it's use case specific. So many said that some said that it would have no impact, and a big portion also said that it depends on how AI is being utilized in the relationship and what processes are in place. As I mentioned earlier, AI use is becoming the expectation. So, how we framed this particular stat is that we actually saw that 84% of buyers would not walk away from that relationship over undisclosed use of AI in that relationship. So that means that only 16% are, at risk of churn there without letting them know. So that's another way to basically say that AI is so ubiquitous that they kind of expect it already. That does come with a big caveat, obviously. 75% want at least some disclosure of how AI is being utilized in their accounting work, in the deliverables, in the relationship, in all aspects of that. So disclosure and governance are becoming the differentiating variables, and not AI usage or adoption itself is what it is being framed at by our clients and our buyers here. Additionally, we wanted to kind of look at some of the oversight measures of that AI usage. So when it comes to cost and speed versus quality, we found that 58% want to balance any AI efficiency gains they might get from those processes with meaningful human review. And that is compared to, you'll also see in that box there, only 11% are going to focus solely on cost and speed gains from AI. So we've got a large majority saying, yes, I value the cost and the efficiency gains and the speed gains. But a large majority are saying, let's take a measured approach. Let's have it balanced with quality and oversight. And so that's what we found consistently in these themes as well. We also see that 86% want at least some human oversight of AI usage in accounting work, and you can see that breakout in the chart on the right there. Only 14% on the flip side are comfortable with full AI autonomy in those relationships, but half want it at certain points, or it depends on the situation. And 1 in 3 are saying, yeah, give me a human review at every single stage, every single possible interaction between AI and data or information or service relationship. So we see that, again, a measured approach. We're getting more and more comfortable with AI, but we want oversight and we want guardrails on how that's being used. So just to kind of summarize some key takeaways on AI and trust, 3 and 4 are saying AI has improved quality, but the vast majority will hold firms responsible for errors. So accountability, not only is it kind of non-negotiable, but it's becoming more of the differentiator than simple AI usage at this point. 40% more likely to engage AI using firms. Remember, we counter that with only 17% are less likely to do so. So what we see is transparency is turning AI from a risk into a differentiator. And then most will not leave over undisclosed AI usage, but most want disclosure on how it's being used, and communication is the key lever there. And then buyers want that balance again. They want the efficiency, but they want meaningful human review and not pure cost and speed optimization. Eric, anything from this section that really stands out to you that caught your eye?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the places where I go old man Eric, and I think about the big things that have impacted professional services in the 2 decades that I've been doing this work, maybe 2.5 decades. And like very early, as I came out of college, we were talking about sort of online and online access and online ready, and then we were talking about mobile ready, and then mobile first, and then mobile optimized. And we were talking about what's your social media strategy, and I think that I bring these examples up because it's sort of laughable to think about them as their own strategies today. And yet each of them went through this phase where we talked about them in a similar way to the way that we talk about AI, and these large language models. And so I think that the thing that we have to remember on this is that this is a massive transformational technological advantage in terms of the amount of things that we can do, the amount of repeatable tasks that now can be automated, the amount of analysis that can happen on data sets that wasn't happening before. But at the end of the day, we are still being hired to provide context, to provide consultative analysis and that human element on it. And that part is really what I think drives through there to me, Darian. And I think, my prediction is that 2 years from now, AI won't even be a topic because to your point, it's already so clear that you cannot keep up with the pace of work without utilizing some of these tools. And so I think where we'll start to see the positioning on this is really more around safeguarding of data, which I think is even more important as the pace of what we do with that data picks up. And so I think you'll hear a lot of conversations around safeguarding of data, and utilization of data, and security. And I think you'll see a lot around how are you utilizing these tools to add more value to me. And that's the part that I think actually gets really exciting, because now if you think about this, like, I don't know why why any of the firms on the call today, or any of the firms that we're working with, aren't really actively looking at the key industries that they work with, the key groups that they work with, and start to think about how can we actually bring additional value to these folks by helping them understand contextually where they sit amongst their peers on key elements. That was a really difficult thing to do a number of years ago that is far less difficult today. And so I just would encourage firms to think about this from a value accelerator. The expectation is that we are going to still hold to the same level of of quality, or better, right? But now we can get there faster with fewer people and fewer hours. So how are we then leveraging some of that additional time to harness the things that people are frustrated with and have been frustrated with in the past? How do we get more proactive, less reactive? How do we add more value above the billable rate by being able to help them contextualize big sources of data and where they sit amongst their peers? Those are the parts that I think are really exciting on this. And I guess one of the questions I would come back to you with is, just barely over 10% of buyers even know sort of how their primary accounting firm is utilizing AI. And I think about our primary accounting firm. I don't know how, where exactly they're utilizing AI. Is that even something that we should be worried about right now? Should we be proactively communicating that in your opinion? I tend to think maybe not, because of what I just said.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think I was actually surprised that that number was so low, to be honest with you. But I think what we're kind of running into is, buyers clients are busy, and to your point, we're not necessarily thinking about our accounting firm's tech stack on any given day. And so, but what I would say, and to kind of pivot that question, I would kind of say that it doesn't, just because we're not necessarily aware or just because we're not necessarily actively, proactively asking that, accounting firms aren't off the hook for how they are or not using that. Again, going back to the disclosure piece, 77% say that they've proactively asked their firm how they're using AI. It tells me there's a genuine appetite for it, but we also see that 86% will hold a firm fully responsible for any errors that occur for that, and 75% will require disclosure on how it's being used. So, generally, what would say is kind of go back to that what I talked about at the beginning, kind of that opportunity versus the expectation, and say, there's not a one size solution for that fits all for each firm, but I would potentially push back a little bit on you and say that we might want to be a little bit more proactive on how we're disclosing that AI use. The good news is that buyers today, and I will frame this as buyers today, seem to be somewhat forgiving about undisclosed AI use. I don't know how long that's going to be the case as we transition more and more into a kind of a fully ubiquitous AI world. But I would say I would lean more towards let's disclose and let's use how we're using it, what we're doing with it. Here's the guardrails we have in place. I would use that as the differentiator, and that transparency, I think, becomes really key in how we can win.
Yeah, I kind of view it almost as a data security piece, right? Where you need to have kind of clear guardrails that you're following, and you need to be able to share those with your clients. But I keep coming back to this piece, which I think is that it's going to be value, right? Just in the same way that if you hired people that were unqualified as your junior associates and they were making a bunch of mistakes, the firm is going to be held accountable for that same thing, right? It's almost a different kind of leverage argument in a professional service firm, and I think that same rules kind of hold to that, right? We still have to have that human value add as a part of it as well. I want to we have a couple questions in here, but I think it's actually we're going to get at it in this next section. So I'm going to go ahead and keep putting questions in. If we don't get to this one, post it again and I'll come back to it. But it's pretty clear that buyers expect us to be utilizing the leading edge technology, which in the time we're in right now means that we're leveraging some aspect of these larger AI tools to be able to do things more efficiently, more effectively than we've done in the past. But they still want humans to be in control, right? They still want that judgment. They still want that thinking partner. I think is how you had put it when we talked about this before. I think that's a nice way to put it. They want a thinking partner, not just a processor. And so when we talk about what they want from their accounting relationships overall, that really kind of comes in and is this next section around the advisory gap. So what did you find in the data there?
Yeah, so the headline here, Eric, is that nearly all buyers want a proactive advisor from their accounting provider, but many currently do not have one. And we've got some really interesting findings here that are pretty stark. So this is the below chart is how buyers are describing their accounting firm's current role in that relationship. And then what we found is on the top left there, 91% want their firm to function as a proactive business advisor, yet just over half would describe their accounting firm's role as mostly or purely compliance focused. So what you're seeing is the difference there. And I phrased that a little funny. It's actually the flip side of that. But the key takeaway here is that 91% want proactive business advisory from their accounting firm. and only 4% are saying that they are primarily advisory at the moment. So what we've got is kind of a transition in just purely compliance-focused relationships, at least the desire from our buyers and clients, to more of the, as Eric put it, the thinking partner. I like that. So that shift of compliance to advisory is definitely real, and it's definitely something that's showing up in our data here. And that the gap there between, the 87 points between that 91% and that 4%, that's probably the starkest finding that we found in all of our data here. And it's one of the largest competitive windows in this report that we can highlight. Additionally, when it comes to initiating those advisory conversations, we wanted to see who's initiating them and what impact that's having on the relationship and satisfaction with that accounting firm. So what we found is that 27% of buyers say their firm proactively initiates those conversations, and you can see the breakout below. Roughly equal was about 37%, and 35% mentioned that the client themselves is the one initiating that. So less than 30% of accounting providers are actively initiating those advisory conversations with clients, despite the findings that we found. 91% would like their firm to be more advisory, and additionally, this top left finding here is 90% we found would pay more for proactive risk and opportunity identification. So there's a gap here. There's a gap between what's being offered in the market and what buyers are saying they want in 2026. I didn't go through the exact resulting Net Promoter Score, but those numbers on the bottom right help us illustrate that there's a real opportunity in satisfaction, loyalty, to proactively bring those topics to our clients. So those that are doing so enjoy a 62 Net Promoter Score. Those that wait for the client to initiate those conversations are only at a 48, which is, it's not a terrible Net Promoter Score, but you can see that gap there has real implications between the proactivity of our advisory conversations and the satisfaction, the loyalty, long term that we're seeing with our clients. So, additionally, we wanted to look at are there appetite and are there barriers to this advisory conversation and investing in advisory services from the client perspective. So what we found is the chart on the left kind of illustrates what potential barriers we might see when we're expanding those services. Cost is the clear number one, so 44% mentioned that. The second one we found really interesting. 31% mentioned that there's a trust gap. They trust their provider for potentially for compliance, but not for strategy. The compliance, but not for those broader, more longer term strategic conversations. That's a gap again, and that's an opportunity as well. You can see there's other barriers below there, bandwidth, awareness of offerings. I think you could also kind of lump into this general conversation of proactivity. But we also looked at, if given additional budget, clients are twice as likely to deepen their advisory service spend with their current firm rather than seeking a new or specialized provider. So we know that there's an appetite. We know that there are barriers. We know that some of those barriers are because conversations are not happening either proactively or retroactively. And we know that basically what we found is that a client wants to give you more business. They'd rather not shop for a new firm. You just have to kind of open the door for them and start those conversations. And there's a real opportunity to win there. So really interesting findings. Eric, I had a question for you that popped up on this one. So 30 this number that we're seeing here, this 31% of buyers that trust for compliance work, but not for strategic advice or advisory services. What do you think a firm actually has to do in order to kind of cross that threshold and become more of an advisor in the client's mind?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we have here is, and we've seen this in some of the other research that we've done as well, Darian, but it comes back to a couple of different things. First of all, a perception that they aren't actually deep enough to really understand my business, is kind of that first piece, right? So if you're doing task-oriented work with me, and that's it, then I don't really trust you to be able to help me with a broader kind of strategic level question, because I don't feel like you have all of the context that you would need to be able to guide me appropriately. So that's kind of the first barrier on that. The second barrier on that is the more industry, and we're seeing a lot of specialization now, Darian, where we're seeing a lot of people really kind of go to market and build out the places where they are strong. And I am 100% on board with this. When we look at the buyer data, it's just so clear that beyond sort of knowing them and knowing your areas of expertise, the next piece that they really want to see you display a true knowledge in is, do you have exposure to other firms like ours? And I think that that's the big thing that a lot of firms are not great at telling that story, even though they might actually have a really good story there as well. And so I think that that's kind of the component on it. I was curious, what your thoughts were around that as well. Is that kind of how you see it on that side? And then I'm going to ask a question from the Q&A here as well that I think you can maybe provide some structure on. What do you think is the barrier to accounting firms being more proactive? I think that this is related to that stat, 27% of firms are proactively bringing advisory topics to the table. So the question from the audience is, what do we think is holding back that number? So maybe hit that, and then I'll add my 2 cents to that as well.
Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. You might have a little bit more personal experience color to add to that based on conversations that you had. But for me, I think it's doing this kind of research for as long as we have. We see that relationships can get comfortable. They can get stale. They can get, and stale has kind of a negative connotation. So what I'll say is relationships can get comfortable, and we can say, okay, I'm delivering value based on, the current expectation of the client. What I'm not doing is leveling up the client's expectation of me and my expectation to service that client. So generally, what I would say is I think the concept is, take a step back, say, hey, what do I do well already? What do I already deliver well? And to Eric's point, what do I deliver well, not just for this client, but this client's competitors or the market in general? What other things can I be doing? So as to why those conversations aren't happening that often, that might be a little bit more of a question for Eric, but I think that the kind of how we get out of that is kind of asking those questions, establish what I do well and build on that, and just kind of a more general, the general advice I would have is, we shouldn't get complacent just because a client says that they're happy. That's great that they're happy, but is that a way to expand that relationship? Is that a way to win more business? I think we need to think about other things that we already do a great job at and work to incorporate those services.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that I would add to that for the people on this call, right? Because most of the people on this call are not the professionals that are meeting directly with the clients. They're marketers, they're business developers, they're CX experts on this for their firms, and you can help your professionals a lot on this by putting them in situations where they are getting more of a view into what their clients are dealing with. And so, one of the best things that I've seen so far is firms that have set up a series of business roundtable events. And they'll just do them simple as luncheons, as coffee meetups. It's invite only. It's usually a mix of 50, 60% customers or current clients, and the rest, just maybe relationships in that same area. But it's very, very specific, right? And so it is, small niche manufacturers in the Portland area, is an example. It is nonprofit leaders within the LA market, right? And you're bringing together like-minded people dealing with similar challenges, and you're just facilitating those conversations. You're not coming with all the answers. You're just really giving them an opportunity to build out a community, which is, again, adding that value above billable rate. And as you're sitting in those conversations, your professionals cannot help but to hear things that is going to help them in their one-on-one conversations, individually, people that aren't even in that room, perhaps thinking about, okay, how do I reach out and say, hey, I heard something the other day. I thought of you. This, I think, could be really impactful for your nonprofit, right? Those types of things go so far, and really are given that extra level of loyalty, and start to build that truly trusted advisor relationship on that as well. Let's make sure that we keep going here. We've got about 25 minutes, and I think I'm dragging down our time. So I'll try to be a little bit more brief with my answers. But I do want to talk about this talent switching risk. I did say at the start that this, to me, is one of the most impactful things that will be impacting the industry for the next 5 to 10 years. And so talk a little bit about that relationship and how buyers and clients look at that.
Yeah, so that's a great segue, Eric. The subline here, 81% would consider switching firms if quality degrades because of talent shortages or staffing issues. And here's, kind of a snapshot of what's already happening. So on the left here, we have more than half of clients that we surveyed believe that talent shortages have already affected them in some way. So we've got, some that have said effective service timelines. 55% have noticed changes in staff account assigned to their account. 56% are concerned about the firm's future service quality as a result of these staffing problems. 81% is kind of the headliner that I mentioned. So 81% are going to consider switching firms if talent shortages degraded service quality. So probably not surprising, right? If service quality goes down, we're going to switch. So really, it's incumbent upon us to figure out how to bridge those the talent shortage gaps. And one of the things that we found is a big buffer that we can have on some of these impacts is transparency. So 78% actually credit their firm with transparent communication on those talent and staffing issues. There's no benefit or no reason to hide those issues at this point. Transparency is the name of the game, and those who strongly agree that their firm is transparent actually those firms enjoy a net promoter score of 79. So probably what you're seeing there is just generally firms that are more communicative, more proactive in general. This just being one of those areas where they're communicative. Those are the firms that have really high loyalty, really high satisfaction rates, and that 79 is actually 24 points above the industry average that we found this year. So the talent shortage the impact is real on clients right now. And that we shouldn't be running from it when it comes to conversations with clients. When we looked at service issues and the premium that buyers might pay on continuity of key contacts, we found that Over half of clients have experienced at least one of the above issues. So we didn't ask an exhaustive list. So this number potentially is higher. But we did ask the ones in the chart here, which mention things like, difficulty reaching or getting responses, frequent changes in staff assigned, decline in proactivity, lower quality, missed delay or missed timelines, things like that. So again, this is clients projecting their feelings that, hey, these things I directly experienced these because of staffing issues or a talent shortage on my accounting firm side. So as I mentioned, over half, so 51% have experienced some sort of service failure because of that. And further, 84% would consider paying a premium for guaranteed senior level attention. So that one's kind of got two parts to it. Obviously, the senior level is doing some of the lifting there, but I think the main part of that is, a strong majority would actually pay more if we could, in some way, structure that account to have consistent service from those same key contacts, from those same providers, and we're really seeing that there's an opportunity there in a tough talent market. Anything else that you want to add in this area, Eric? This is really interesting stuff, and something that we've been navigating and that we're going to continue to navigate as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the data in terms of the number of professionals that the industry is losing to retirement each year, the average age of professionals in the industry, and the number of new degrees that are coming out to sort of fill the industry. This is going to be, this war for talent is going to stay really at the forefront, really at least for the next 5 to 10 years, in my opinion, maybe longer. And so these tools that are making us more efficient so that we can put professionals on the highest value tasks are actually coming at a really good time for the industry, because otherwise I think that we would run into real true constraints in terms of limiting growth on this. But what it does mean is, it does mean that we need continuity, and we need to be multi-threaded in these relationships as much as possible on both the firm side as well as the client side. And we need to have a playbook in place, right? When somebody leaves, we need to be able to jump in on that, and have some clear SLAs around response time, around how questions get escalated and get handled on there as well. And I think that when we do that well, we actually see the process in the firm being stronger than any one professional, and that's ultimately what you want. Is you want to put great professionals into a process that makes them look like superheroes. And the firms that are doing that well are able to grow and continue to have that high level of engagement and loyalty with their clients. And the firms that don't, eventually they kind of go, they go through a growth phase, and then they give a lot of that growth back because they don't deliver, and they go through a growth phase, and then they give that growth back because they don't deliver. So I think that that's a key component there as well. And I think this actually plays into the fixed fee piece. So let's talk through that data as well.
Absolutely. So we are seeing from the data that we gathered this year that the hourly billing, so preference to be billed hourly, has shrunk all the way to only 5% of clients are saying that. Buyers are telling us something, and what they're telling us is that when it comes to their current billing model versus their preferred billing model, there's some real gaps there. So we've got 12% that are currently billed hourly. Less than half of that number is their preference would be to be billed hourly. And what we're seeing is that the real gainer here is the fixed annual retainer. So 28% currently being billed that way. Preference to be billed that way, nearly half, so 46%. Yeah, and so what we're seeing is that those that are being billed on an annual retainer, a fixed annual retainer, those clients are reporting a Net Promoter Score of 70. So which is 15 points higher than the overall Net Promoter Score figure. So the retainer model isn't really just about billing preference. I mean, clearly there's a huge story here, and that's the market isn't quite meeting clients where they would prefer in that area. But what we're really seeing is that that model correlates with meaningfully higher satisfaction, loyalty, and expansion as well. And then further, we had another AI specific question on fees. A really interesting topic in many areas is what does AI do for me as the buyer of the service? Does it raise my fees? Does it raise my costs or does it lower them? We actually found kind of an interesting split. So potentially not surprising, there's some disagreement on what that ultimately might look like. But we actually found that 40% said that they would expect a decrease in those fees as AI enables efficiencies, enables each provider to do more. And we actually found that only 24% expect an increase, and the remainder kind of are in the middle there. So right now, what we're seeing is that there's no real settled narrative on this. Buyers are, kind of generally uncertain about how AI might affect their pricing, and what we think is that this represents a clear opportunity to kind of shape this narrative, before the default assumption becomes that AI is cheaper. So you all have instituted AI at your firm, so I should get a decrease in the rates that I'm paying. And so there's a lot of opportunity to kind of shape that before that becomes the default. And anything else to add in this area, Eric? I know we're kind of pushing forward quickly here.
Yeah, there's a lot to cover, right? The thing that I guess my statistical analysis on this is like people don't really know. They just are they expect that things should happen somewhat quicker, but they also recognize that there's some investment in that to allow that to happen in a quicker way. What I would say that the piece that I see in the data and that I see in the conversations that I'm having is that there's just an expectation if I'm going to pay the same amount, you need to have increased the value on that. And that means that, maybe it takes less of my time because you're going to utilize some of these tools to, bring the information forward to me in an easier manner. So you're going to save me time on that. You're going to save yourself time on it, or you're going to utilize some of those savings to add more value than you've added in the past. And so I just think the justification for what we're charging is just going to continue to be put a little bit under the microscope. Not necessarily that it needs to walk backwards and cost less, but that the value has to stay commensurate with it when the path to get to that the main components is maybe a little bit different than it was in the past. So that's kind of my take on it. I also think too that a couple of years ago the industry started to utilize offshore resources a lot, and rolled that out. Some more rocky than others, but I think there's some real lessons to how that was done. And I remember having a conversation with a professional at a pretty large firm that said that they rolled out that they were utilizing some offshore resources for some of the work that was being done, and that they were increasing prices pretty significantly, and they rolled those out at the same time. And in hindsight, they actually said that worked in some ways fairly well because people would push back about not wanting their work to be done offshore. And that allowed them to really hold the line on the increase in the price. If you want it to be all done here locally, there is a price premium that comes with that. And I think that there's some of that same work there as well, right? If you don't want us to utilize some of these tools, then it's going to take longer and it's going to cost more. And so that's kind of how I would think about some of those conversations there as well. I just want to remind everybody we've got about 10 more minutes here. So Darian's going to run through these last two topics real quick, and then we will take some Q&A from the audience. So if you have additional questions, I've worked a couple of them in as we've gotten there, but if you have additional questions, go ahead and put them into the Q&A tab or into the chat, either one, and we will capture those here in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. So these last two, as I mentioned, kind of a lightning round here. This is two separate data stories that are, everything's interrelated, but one of them revolves regulatory concerns and guidance, and then the second one is around satisfaction of the industry, which is quite important, and I want to make sure we cover it. So regulatory concerns and guidance at a glance on the regulatory side of things. We see top concerns, trade, tariffs, import, export, 56%. And then we've got data privacy and security, 54%. So 56, sorry, and 54%. So we've got some clear winners on where clients are, spending their energy or their concern energy, I should say. So this is a good way for us to kind of understand where buyers are coming from, where clients are coming from, and also to rank order the conversations we might be having with them to add additional value and really become more of that advisor. Additionally, we found that 61% of clients are turning to their primary accounting firm for regulatory guidance, which is strong. But at the same time, 34% are supplementing regulatory guidance with AI tools or just general online research. So that 34% tells us that you're never going to get that number to zero, obviously, because firms are going to want to have their own research and their own internal guidance as well. But it does represent an opportunity. There could be some from that 34% that could be lumped back into if we were to have more proactive advisory conversations, we could see that 61% number go up and up. So again, it's important for us to understand what clients are concerned with and to help guide those conversations that we might have with them. Additionally, kind of to wrap up here on our individual themes, we've got kind of a satisfaction snapshot of the industry, which is a really strong baseline, to be honest with you. And I debated about whether leading off with this or ending with this. I thought it fit kind of here nicely at the end that we've got a strong baseline of satisfaction, but that switching threats do exist. So we have an industry Net Promoter Score of 55, which is actually quite strong. 95% of those that we surveyed actually intend to continue with their current firm. There's some agreement scale variability in there as well, but generally clients are quite satisfied. But 78% are likely to purchase additional services. I think the gap between those two bottom numbers is really interesting, and ideally you would like to see those numbers be the same. And then the top drivers of potential firm switching, so a reason why clients might leave, repeated errors, quality, poor crisis handling, and then significant fee increases. So actually quality and decline in quality is actually more detrimental than cost itself, which is rare to actually find something that trumps cost and fees in terms of importance. But what we're seeing here is that, if we can control quality, if we can deliver value, and keep doing so, then we're going to deter switching, obviously. But that matters even more than what we might do with our fees. So moving on here to final thoughts here. In general, one theme that kept popping up is that buyers are ready. They say they're ready to give you more, but basically it's a matter of positioning in order to receive additional business. So these are some takeaways and just general pieces of advice. Obviously, these are not applicable to all, but they are data driven, and the data kept hitting us over the head with these key themes. So lead with AI transparency, and let's turn accountability into that differentiator. As I said, there's some forgiveness if it's not disclosed, but let's kind of turn that around and say, okay, if we are using it, let's be transparent, let's be accountable, and proceed arm in arm with the clients that way. Number two would be initiate advisory conversations. The demand is there and the supply isn't always there. Clients are telling us that they want their accounting firms to be advisors. They want them to be more strategic partners, and they aren't always being met where they're at. Number three would be to communicate proactively about staffing, particularly shortages, talent shortages, things like that. And we found that transparency itself is a retention strategy. Those that are communicative about those things, those issues that they're experiencing, clients are generally forgiving and understanding of that because in many cases they are going through something similar on their side as well. And then move towards fixed retainers. Again, this isn't one piece of advice for all, but fixed retainers are buyers are ready and demanding more that they are billed that way. And the net promoter case is clear, really, in that one. Satisfaction swing is clear. And then build visible expertise in trade tariffs and data privacy, and generally the window is open for advisory and help and guidance in those areas as clients are seeking them out. All right. With that, let's move to some Q&A. Eric, if you had any last questions or if there's any questions from chat that we might want to tackle.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple in here. So I'll ask this one first. What's the biggest mistake that you see firms make when they try to expand their advisory services? The piece that what I would say is that the biggest mistake I see is that they're not staying close to what their clients need. They're going from hey, here are the types of things that we have expertise around, and let me go find an audience to those, versus, hey, here are the type of clients that we serve really, really well. And how do we actually go and build more advisory services around that piece of it? So that would be kind of my take on that one. The next question I'm actually going to send to you. When you look at NPS, what are some of the key trends that you're seeing in this year's data versus the others? And I'll push you a little bit on this because I know those that have been clients for a while, there's a real dip in NPS, and so there's a little bit of a trough that happens. I think it's at like year 5 or 6. So talk a little bit about that and maybe any of the other things that you're seeing.
Yeah, so net promoter score for the industry this year, as I mentioned, 55. We're actually seeing a pretty strong increase versus our last official benchmark that we published. So what that suggests to me is that just industry-wide, there's more effort to engage clients in solid service relationships, right? I don't read too much more into it than that at the service level. To answer your question, Eric, about the NPS troughs that we see for tenured clients, specifically kind of generally in the 5 to 8 to 10 year range, something like that. Kind of almost goes back to what I mentioned earlier, where there's a little bit of a complacency dynamic on both sides, both client and provider. And the early years of a relationship involve a lot of attention, a lot of specific onboarding, a lot of specific, hey, what value can we add for you? What can we do for you today? As it's natural for those relationships to get a little bit complacent on both sides. And this is a client thing as well too. They're not thinking day to day about, hey, if nothing's going wrong, that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't necessary, value misses that could be added on their side. So, when we see that relationship get past that trough into the 8+ 10+ year range, those are the really long lasting relationships, and the net promoter score really jumps high amongst those. 15+ years in, I think net promoter score is 84, I believe. So near universal satisfaction at that point. And so basically what this suggests is that if you survive the trough, and I would kind of flip it and not say survive it. I would say if you know that somewhat tenured relationships are at risk, focus on it. Focus on, hey, let's have conversations with that mid-level group or the mid-tenured group, and reinvest in that relationship, and you'll get rewarded with loyalty long term on that one. So that's how I would answer that question, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I know we're at time. As you can see, you can scan to download your free copy of the report on there as well. So please feel free to do that. Again, thank you to the Association for Accounting Marketing as being a great partner again on this research. Thank you, everybody, for taking part in today's session as well. For those of you who are already clients and continuing to mature your client experience programs with us, we appreciate that. And we still see a lot of effort being put into client experience now, and we're thrilled to be at the center point of that for the accounting industry, powering more client experience programs than any other firm in the world. So thank you all. We'll continue to really invest in this industry and try to bring value back to each and every one of you. Have a great day.